It was a crisp morning along the coast of Pacific Crest, a picturesque city where luxury yachts docked alongside gritty fishing vessels. The air was salty, the waves gently lapping against the pier, as tourists sipped coffee and strolled along the waterfront. It was just another ordinary day for Tasha Miller, a dedicated police detective in her early 30s, who had just finished her usual morning jog. The sun was still low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the water, and the sounds of seagulls and laughter filled the air. For Tasha, this run was part of her routine, a way to clear her mind before heading into another day of tackling the smuggling ring that had been plaguing the docks for months. Tasha had worked her way up the ranks in the police force, earning respect for her sharp instincts and relentless work ethic. At 32, she had already established herself as one of the top detectives in the undercover division, often blending into the very communities she investigated. She was no stranger to tough situations, especially ones where she had to play the part of someone she wasn't, whether it was a local, a criminal, or an innocent bystander. This morning, however, she was simply another face in the crowd, wearing worn joggers and a faded hoodie, trying to enjoy her workout. As Tasha jogged past the pier's end, her hazel eyes scanned the surroundings. Her job was to keep an eye out for the smuggling ring she had been investigating, and today, like every other day, she was on high alert. It didn't take long for her to spot the boat, the one with peeling blue paint, bobbing gently in the water. The figure unloading crates too quickly for a fisherman caught her attention. Slowing her pace, she pretended to stretch, her sharp eyes focused on the man. She could already feel the threads of the case weaving together. She'd make a note to report this later. But just as she was about to reach for her phone to update her team, a shadow fell across her. She turned to see Officer Sarah Turner, a rookie cop in her mid-20s, standing in front of her. The girl's gaze was hard, skeptical, and, though Tasha couldn't place it at first, something about her posture made Tasha tense. Sarah's uniform was pristine, her badge gleaming in the morning sun. Yet, her sneer told Tasha this wasn't about a professional interaction. No, this was about something else, something more personal. Tasha stood up straight, meeting Sarah's gaze with a calm that belied the growing tension in her chest. "Just jogging," she said, trying to keep her tone neutral. But Sarah wasn't buying it. "Jogging? In this part of town? We've had reports of pickpockets." Sarah's words were laced with doubt, as if Tasha's presence there was some kind of threat. Tasha's gut tightened. She could already feel the crowd of tourists staring, their curious eyes now on her. This wasn't the first time someone had doubted her because of the color of her skin, but something about Sarah's dismissive tone made it different. Tasha's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I live just up the street," she replied, hoping the answer would end the conversation. But Sarah wasn't convinced. She demanded to see an ID, something Tasha didn't have on her, a standard procedure for undercover work. Tasha's frustration started to bubble up. She wasn't just a jogger, she wasn't just another local. She was Detective Tasha Miller, a professional, a person who had earned her place in the department. But none of that seemed to matter as Sarah's grip tightened. Before Tasha could explain further, Sarah grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back. In an instant, the handcuffs snapped shut, cold metal biting into Tasha's wrists. "You're coming with me," Sarah said, her voice dripping with a superiority that stung. The crowd swelled, phones in hand, and Tasha's world spun. She tried to speak, to clear her name, but Sarah's loud, accusatory shout drowned her out. "Thief!" The word echoed across the pier, and just like that, Tasha's world flipped upside down. She was no longer a detective. She was a criminal, at the mercy of a rookie cop who had made up her mind long before hearing the truth. Tasha's world seemed to blur as Officer Sarah Turner led her toward the police car. The harsh bite of the cuffs around her wrists was the only thing grounding her in the present, the metal digging into her skin as she stumbled over the rough pier. Her breath came in shallow gasps, a mix of disbelief and anger swirling in her chest. How had everything gone so wrong so quickly? One moment, she was following the lead on a smuggling ring, just another part of her routine, and the next, she was being dragged across the pier like a common criminal. The crowd had grown, and the jeering whispers and camera flashes felt like daggers in her back. "You're making a mistake," Tasha muttered under her breath, trying to keep her composure. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, but she knew if she lost control now, if she allowed her emotions to show, it would only confirm what Sarah had already decided, that she was guilty, without cause or proof. Her mind raced with the unfairness of it all, the frustration of not being able to make herself heard, to explain who she really was. Officer Turner shoved Tasha into the back of the police car, the door slamming shut with a finality that felt suffocating. The sound of the sirens echoed in her ears as the car pulled away from the pier, the cityscape shrinking behind them. The cool breeze of the early morning had turned into a stifling heat inside the car, and Tasha could feel the sweat starting to form on her skin. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, but one thought kept surfacing over and over: what now? The drive to the Pacific Crest Police Department felt like an eternity. She stared out the window, watching the world pass by, her mind trying to focus on the task at hand. The smuggling ring was still out there, and she had a job to do. But with every mile that passed, it became harder to concentrate. She wasn't just fighting the criminals on the streets anymore. Now, she was up against the system she had spent years trying to protect. At the precinct, Tasha was unceremoniously hauled out of the car and shoved toward the holding area. Her sneakers squeaked on the linoleum floor as she was escorted past the desks of officers who barely glanced at her. Some were curious, others indifferent, but there was one officer, Sergeant Luis Patel, who noticed her immediately. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a brief moment, he seemed to recognize her. "Wait a second," he said, stepping forward. "That's Lieutenant Miller." Tasha's heart skipped a beat. Sergeant Patel had been her partner for years, and he knew exactly who she was. But before he could act, Sarah Turner cut him off with a sharp command. "Suspicious activity at the pier. No ID. She says she's one of us, but there's no proof." Tasha bit back a sharp retort, her jaw tightening. This was insane. She had been undercover for months, working to bust a smuggling operation, and now she was being treated like a criminal. It was a rookie cop's prejudice, pure and simple. But it was more than that, it was a systemic problem, one that could easily undo everything she had worked for. "Check her ID," Sarah ordered, her voice cold and dismissive. She was acting like this was all part of the job, like Tasha wasn't the respected lieutenant she had become. Tasha held her ground. "You can verify my ID through Captain Ortiz. Badge number 7392. Just make the call." But Sarah wasn't listening. She was too busy shoving Tasha toward the holding area, dismissing her claims as if they meant nothing. The sound of the holding door clanging shut behind her felt like the final nail in the coffin. Tasha took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She was in the lion's den now, and she couldn't let her temper get the better of her. If she was going to get out of this, it had to be with her wits, not her fists. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Tasha sat on the cold bench, her wrists aching from the cuffs, as she waited for the call to come through. The precinct hummed around her, phones ringing, officers shouting orders, the typical chaos of a busy police department. But all of it seemed to fade into the background as she steeled herself for what was coming next. The only thing that mattered now was clearing her name. The truth had to come out. But as she waited, the doubt crept in. If this was all some kind of setup, if Officer Turner was using her position to frame Tasha, how could she prove it? What if she couldn't? What if the system she had spent her life serving had turned against her? Her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just about smuggling anymore. This was about survival. And the real fight was just beginning. The minutes dragged on in the holding cell like hours, and Tasha's mind spun with the weight of what was happening. Her phone was confiscated, her identity questioned, and she was being treated like a criminal, when in reality, she was the one trying to stop a dangerous smuggling ring. Her head ached with frustration as she rubbed her sore wrists, trying to keep her cool. She had trained for chaos, for the unpredictability of the streets, but nothing had prepared her for this betrayal from her own department. When Sergeant Patel finally arrived, his eyes flickered with hesitation. He was a veteran officer who had served alongside Tasha for years, but now he looked almost uncertain. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say anything, Officer Sarah Turner interrupted him. Suspicious activity on the pier. She's claiming to be a lieutenant, but no ID to back it up, she explained, her voice dripping with skepticism. Tasha could feel the weight of the lie pressing down on her, but she fought to keep her voice steady. Patel, Tasha said, her voice calm but firm. You know who I am. Call Captain Ortiz, badge number 7392. He'll confirm it. Patel hesitated, his eyes flicking between her and Sarah, who glared at him as though daring him to make the call. He finally nodded, turning to grab a radio. The seconds that passed felt like an eternity, and Tasha's anxiety grew with each one. Would Ortiz pick up the phone? Would he verify her identity? She had been in this situation before, accused and misunderstood, but this time felt different. The stakes were higher, and this rookie officer seemed determined to break her down. Then came the click of a scanner, followed by a nervous voice. Lieutenant Tasha Miller. Undercover Division. Everything checks out. It was a small victory, but it didn't feel like one. As the officer read her credentials aloud, Sarah's face twisted in anger, clearly frustrated by the proof of Tasha's identity. Doesn't mean anything, Sarah muttered, her tone full of venom. She's still guilty of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. We've got evidence she was near stolen goods on the pier. Tasha's stomach twisted in disgust. It was a blatant lie, a fabrication to get her out of the picture. Sarah had decided that her own prejudice was more important than the truth. Tasha could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to stay calm. That's a lie, she snapped, her voice sharp. I was gathering intel. You've got no evidence. But Sarah wasn't listening. With a flourish, she handed the fabricated report to Sergeant Patel. Tasha's eyes burned as she read the false accusations, Tasha Miller linked to stolen goods. It was everything Tasha feared, an intentional attempt to sabotage her mission, to keep her out of the picture. She had faced dangerous criminals, ruthless smugglers, and crooked officials before, but never had she imagined a fellow officer, someone she once trusted, would turn against her in such a brutal, unjust way. File it, Sarah ordered, a smug smile curling at the corners of her lips. We've got her now. Tasha felt her blood boil, but she held back her rage. She was Lieutenant Tasha Miller, and she had faced worse than this. She had to stay focused. The smuggling ring was still out there, and she couldn't let one corrupt officer destroy everything she'd worked for. As the false report was processed, Tasha was locked in a cell, the door slamming shut with a finality that left her breathless. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot, but she was beginning to realize how deep the corruption ran, within her own force. The smuggling ring was only part of it. This was a fight against a system that was supposed to protect people like her, but was now working to tear her down. She couldn't trust anyone, and now, more than ever, she had to rely on herself to survive. Tasha was trapped in the cell, her mind racing with anger, disbelief, and a growing sense of helplessness. The world outside the bars was spinning, and she could feel the pressure mounting. This wasn't just about the corrupt officers or the smuggling ring anymore, this was a fight for her life, her career, and everything she had worked for. She clenched her fists, the metal cuffs biting into her skin, and tried to steady her breathing. The echo of footsteps grew louder in the hallway as she struggled to clear her head. The system was broken, and she had just become a casualty of it. Minutes dragged on until the sound of the door opening broke the silence. Standing in front of her was Captain Michael Ortiz, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. Tasha had known him for years, his steady presence had always been a source of reassurance, and now, more than ever, she needed that calm. But as she looked at him, she saw something different in his eyes, concern, yes, but also a hint of helplessness. She swallowed hard, her chest tightening. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on her, and she struggled to keep her voice even. Captain, Tasha said, her voice steady despite the frustration bubbling inside her. It's all a setup. They're framing me. Sarah Turner's fabricating evidence against me. I need your help. Ortiz didn't speak right away. Instead, he studied her, his brow furrowed as he weighed the situation. His eyes flicked to the guard standing just outside the cell, then back to her. I know, Tasha, he said quietly, his tone low and filled with regret. I've been hearing rumors about what happened on the pier, but I didn't expect it to go this far. I'll get you out of here, but you need to understand, you're under investigation now. Tasha's stomach churned. She had hoped for a quick resolution, for a simple apology and her name cleared, but Ortiz's words hit her like a punch to the gut. You're telling me you're not going to help? Her voice cracked with disbelief, but she forced the words out. You know I didn't do this. You know I've been on this case for months. Ortiz's eyes softened for a moment, but the reality of the situation was undeniable. He wasn't in a position to challenge the corruption within his own department. Not yet, anyway. The system was too deep, too powerful. I'm going to do what I can, he said, his tone growing firmer. I'll make some calls, but you need to stay calm. We need to keep a low profile until we have more evidence. There are too many people in this precinct who want to see you taken down. Sarah Turner's report will hold up for now, and until we can expose the truth, you're going to have to keep your head down. Tasha felt the weight of his words settle on her like a heavy cloak. She had spent years fighting for justice, pushing through obstacles, always doing what was right. Now, it felt like the world had turned on her, and the very system she had dedicated her life to was the one that was betraying her. She shook her head, trying to push the wave of frustration and fear away. I'm not backing down, she said, her voice hardening with determination. This smuggling ring won't disappear because of a lie. I'm going to stop it, no matter what it takes. Ortiz sighed, his eyes searching hers. I know you, Tasha, he said quietly. But this isn't just about the smugglers anymore. You're up against something much bigger now. You've got to be careful. There are people who will stop at nothing to keep you from taking them down. Tasha nodded, her resolve hardening. She had come too far to let a few corrupt officers destroy everything she had worked for. The smuggling ring was still out there, and she was the one person who could bring them down. She wasn't going to let a false arrest and a fabricated report stop her. As Ortiz left, promising to find a way to help, Tasha was left alone in the cell with her thoughts. The weight of her situation pressed heavily on her chest. She had fought against criminals, yes, but this was different. This was a fight for her integrity, her future. But as the hours stretched on and the noise of the precinct faded into the background, one thing became clear: the battle had just begun. Tasha sat in her apartment, the weight of everything that had happened over the past few days pressing down on her. She couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped in a web of lies. The walls of the precinct, the cell where she had been held, even her own apartment, all of it felt like a prison. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen. It was a text from Marcus, her partner and confidant. Her heart skipped a beat. She opened the message, and her stomach dropped as she read the words, "We've got the footage. You were right. It's all there." Tasha's pulse quickened as she grabbed her coat and bolted out the door. She knew this was it, the break she had been waiting for. The tape, the one piece of evidence that could clear her name and expose the truth. She met Marcus at the coffee shop, her mind racing. As she slid into the booth across from him, he wasted no time pulling out his laptop and showing her the footage. It was the footage from the pier, the moment when Sarah Turner had arrested her, calling her a thief in front of a crowd. But this time, the angle was different. From the shadowed corner of the dock, the camera had captured the full exchange. It was clear now: Turner had known exactly who Tasha was. She had seen the badge tucked in Tasha's pocket and still decided to frame her. The video was a smoking gun. Tasha watched in silence as the footage played again, the reality of it sinking in. Turner's taunts, her manipulative grin, all of it was caught on camera. The evidence was irrefutable. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, this was deliberate. A corrupt officer using her power to sabotage Tasha's career, and worse, potentially endanger her life. What now? Marcus asked, his voice low. He could see the storm brewing in Tasha's eyes. We make it public, she said, her voice colder than he'd ever heard it. We release this video. Turner can't lie her way out of this. She'll have to answer for what she did. It's time to show the world who she really is. Marcus hesitated for a moment, glancing at the video again. The public's reaction would be fierce, and releasing it would likely put them all in the line of fire. Are you sure? He asked quietly. Tasha nodded. I'm not letting her get away with this. I've fought too hard for this job, for justice, and I won't let one officer's hate and prejudice take everything from me. With resolve hardening in her chest, Tasha knew there was no turning back. She had the truth now, and she wasn't going to stay silent. As Marcus worked to leak the footage to the press, Tasha paced, her mind already shifting to the next phase of her plan. The smugglers were still out there, and Turner's lies had given them time to slip away. But now, with her name cleared, she could focus on bringing them down. That night, as news outlets across the city began airing the video, Tasha's phone buzzed constantly. Messages flooded in, some of support, others filled with disbelief, but all underscored one thing: the fight for justice had only just begun. Turner's career was over. But Tasha knew that the true battle, the one that would decide her future, was still ahead. And she was ready. The next morning, Tasha's phone buzzed incessantly. News stations were running the video on repeat, with headlines flashing across every screen: corrupt officer exposed, how a senior detective was framed by one of her own. It was the moment Tasha had been waiting for, but as she scrolled through the messages on her phone, a heavy feeling settled in her chest. While the video had vindicated her, it had also placed her squarely in the public spotlight. She stood by the window in her apartment, watching as the sun began to rise over the city. It should have felt like a victory, but the reality of what was coming next hit her like a freight train. The smuggling operation that she had been working tirelessly to infiltrate hadn't gone away. If anything, it had just become more dangerous. Her name and face were now everywhere, and she couldn't afford to take another misstep. Her mind raced as she thought of the next steps: how to finish the job she had started, how to go after the real criminals. She knew they would be watching. Tasha had no illusions. The smugglers, like the corrupt officers in the precinct, were always one step ahead. But she had something they didn't: the truth. And she was prepared to use it. As Tasha prepared to meet with her team, the doorbell rang. She opened it to find her lawyer, Emily, standing on the other side. Emily's face was drawn with concern, her sharp eyes scanning Tasha quickly. We need to talk, Emily said, stepping inside. Tasha's stomach churned. What's happened? Emily took a deep breath before sitting down. It's about the investigation. They're already trying to turn the narrative against you. Tasha's heart dropped. She had expected resistance, but this was something she wasn't prepared for. Emily continued, they're claiming that the video you released isn't enough. They're saying you manipulated the footage to make Sarah Turner look guilty, and some are even questioning your motives. Tasha clenched her fists. Of course they are. They always protect their own. Emily's voice softened. The department is circling. They'll dig up anything they can to discredit you. And it won't just be about Turner anymore. They'll go after your career, your integrity, everything. You're a target now, Tasha. Tasha felt the walls closing in. She had been so focused on the smugglers, on getting the truth out, that she hadn't considered the full weight of the battle she was now facing within her own department. She had just exposed the corruption of one officer, but that wasn't the end of the fight. It had only made her more dangerous to those in power, and now, they would make sure she couldn't win. I'm not backing down, Tasha said, her voice steely. I've already sacrificed too much to let them destroy me now. Emily nodded, a small but knowing smile flickering across her face. I'm with you. We'll fight this, but you need to be prepared. It's going to get ugly. Tasha's eyes hardened as she looked out the window again, her mind already racing with plans to track down the smugglers. The fight for her name was one battle, but the war against the corruption in the department, and the real criminals, was far from over. Tasha had nothing left to lose, and that made her the most dangerous person in the room. As long as she still had breath in her lungs, she would fight to the very end.